Hey guys, it's Ryan here with HobbiesofaMan. Let's get into today. We're doing another Frieren review. We're going to be looking at the Travel to Äußerst arc. This is the third arc in the Frieren story. This is, I can't remember what chapters exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's volumes 3 and 4. The second half of 3 and the first half of 4, if I remember correctly. It's 5 to 6 chapters, something like that. It's written by Kanehito Yamada and drawn by Tsukasa Abe. It's published by Viz under the Shugakukan line that they have, the Shonen Sunday line, which is the one with the big S at the top of the volumes. And the demographic for this is shonen, obviously. And the genres here are fantasy, slice of life, coming of age, and adventure, right? That's kind of the whole idea, right? It's the journey beyond the journey's end, if that makes sense. In terms of adaptation, it does have an anime, like I mentioned before. It's probably the easiest way to get into the series. I recommend it because I think that it immerses you a bit more, because the story is good in both of them and the adaptation is well done. You don't really miss out anything, you miss some information here and there. But I think that the additional sound and animation and color that comes with the anime probably works a bit more to get you immersed if you're someone that struggles with that sort of stuff, right? So, maybe watch it first and then come back and read the rest of it. And the rating for this arc is a 5 out of 5. I think it's perfectly good. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not necessarily the most exciting arc in the story, but it is quite good. And I think it highlights kind of a lot of the changes that Frieren is going through by giving us a character that maybe is similar to her in some ways, right? So, yeah, in terms of premise here, the characters have moved on from Grafgranat's town. They have basically gotten on into the middle region of the world. They're in the wilds now. They're crossing, and they need to travel to Äußerst, which is the big city, the big magic city, where they're gonna go do the first class mage qualification exam, right? So they have to travel north. They get caught in a storm at some point during that traveling, and they end up finding a cabin that Frieren remembers from her youth. And this is where they meet up with another elf, right? And this elf is called Kraft, or Croft, I guess is how you would say it. And they talk about religion. At this point, Kraft is a elf that has lived for basically incountable amounts of years. He's older than Frieren, or at least it seems like he is. And at this point, he's gotten to the realization that he is more than humans, but he still wants the same things that humans want. He wants reassurance. He wants, life after death. He wants to know that there is someone that cares about him beyond the mortal realm, right? And the fact that most people that he cares about die rather quickly, from his perspective, means that he wants someone that is more eternal than him, right? And this ends up being the goddess. And so he is a priest like Heiter. He is a believer in the main Christian analog religion of this world. And he needs the goddess to exist so that he can, be happy with his life. And I think that's interesting, as I'm personally someone that, thinks religion is probably for a bygone era. We don't really need it. I think the evolutionary need for religion is understandable, but we're so far from the basic needs that religion covers that maybe it's not necessary for it to exist. There is, still need for moral and ethical teachings, but we don't need religion to be that, right? If you're only a good person because a god is going to punish you if you're not, then you're not really a good person, right? That's kind of my thought process there. So I think religion's not necessary, but I understand that people have these religious thoughts, right? And I actually think that this is probably the best reason why religion should exist and continue to exist, right? This conversation that Kraft has here, which is, I want to matter to someone. And if I believe in the goddess, I know that someone does believe in me, right? Again, it's a bit circular, but most religious thought processes are anyways, so it's not really all that different from religion in the real world, right? So they're in this cabin, they're stuck together, and Kraft and Frieren have a bit of a connection there. And this kind of moment where Kraft asks Frieren, who is she? What does she do? And she tells him that she saved the world once. And he's like, okay, but what about it, right? Like, who cares? And Fern kind of acts a bit upset about this. And what happens is that this is when he tells, Fern, like, hey, this might be the greatest, most important thing to humans in their life, But to us, elves who live, countless years, it's just a whatever event, right? Who cares? If you live long enough, you'll save the world multiple times, basically. And I think that that's an interesting kind of point as well, right? So eventually they move on. The storm finishes. The snow finally melts, and they move on. And they arrive at the sword village. This is where Himmel became the hero. He pulled the sword out of the stone, and the people of this village have been waiting for Frieren to show up and help them deal with some of the monsters that become powerful and strong in this region, right? And this is when we learn that Himmel actually wasn't the hero. He did not pull the sword out of the stone. He was not the great king that was promised, right? The once and future king, I guess. And even though he didn't pull the sword from the stone, he was still the ultimate hero. He was the one that defeated the demon lord. He was the person that was needed. And maybe another hero will come later and pull the sword then, but that will be a different story, right? That will be a different situation. They kill this giant monster that lives in this region quite easily. And at this point, I thought maybe it was Frieren that was supposed to pull the sword. Maybe she was the hero all along, and because she wasn't interested, she didn't do it, but she still managed to kill the Demon King. But it doesn't seem to be the case. But it would have been an interesting twist for me. And this was interesting because Stark looks up to Himmel for being a hero a lot. And this actually means a lot to Stark to know that he was a hero even though he wasn't destined to be, right? And this is quite meaningful to them. We have a new situation. They move on to a different village, and it turns out that it's Stark's birthday at this point. And so Frieren makes him a giant steak, and this is kind of a tradition for warriors and something that Frieren learned from Eisen. And so Stark gets a bit melancholic, and we learn his backstory at this point. We learn that Stark is from a special warrior village, and he was the weakest member of his village. He was the son of the chief, but he was the youngest son of the chief, and he was someone that just couldn't live up to the expectations met for him. And the thing is that he was a very hard worker, but he wasn't a genius, not like his brother. And so that's kind of the issue. His father had expectations of him that he could eventually meet, but he couldn't meet in the moment. And so his father treated him like shit because of it. And so his older brother was the only person that cared about him. And one of the things that his brother would do to make sure that Stark felt good was to give him a big steak, a big hamburger steak for his birthday. And this is why it's so important to him, right? And then we move on. We meet Sane, who is a priest character. He's kind of like Heiter, but he's ultimately more like Frieren. He starts off his introduction by being stuck in a quicksand pit. Frieren pulls him out. Then he saves Stark from a poisoning. And then Frieren tries to recruit him because they need a priest on their team. Basically, priests are the healer characters in this world because they use the goddess as incantations to save people, and they are able to dispel curses, they're able to heal, and they're able to do things that wizards can't, at least to an extent, right? And so they need him, but Sane doesn't really want to go. He wants to live in town. He thinks that he is disrespecting his older brother's sacrifice if he doesn't leave. And this becomes a big issue with them. His brother and him get into a fight. We get to see the backstory where it turns out that they were children. Heiter comes into the village, gets them interested in being priests and realizing that, they don't have to be that great. They just have to believe in the goddess and believe in her teachings. They don't have to be good people necessarily, or they don't have to be pious or almost monk-like, right? They just have to believe in the goddess and do their best to follow her teachings, right? And this is when we learned that Sane thought that his older brother was living here against his wishes in order to keep Sane safe. And he would be disrespecting him if he left, right, at this point. And his brother slaps him, and he's like, dude, shut up. I made my choice. I'm happy with it. Now it's your turn to make your choice. Go and live free and be happy, right? And we also have this really funny moment where Frieren tries to convince him by smooching him, right? By sending him a little kiss, by blowing him a little kiss. And the thing is, of course, that Frieren is like a lolly type character, and Sane wants like a mommy type character. And so when Frieren tries to use the fact that she's actually really old to try to convince him with that smooch, it doesn't work because he's like, dude, you look like a kid. Go away. And I thought it was pretty funny. Frieren obviously does not look like a kid, and she's like 1,000 years old, but she has that kind of like younger body archetype that Sane is not looking for. And so I thought it was pretty funny. I thought it was a bit of a meta joke, but I liked it. I thought it was enjoyable. And so eventually he joins them, and he becomes the teen whisperer for the team. Basically, Frieren is so far removed from puberty and from human interaction that when she sees Fern and Stark fight and have childish debates and kind of almost have like a romance without it getting to the point that it's romantic yet, she has no clue what the fuck's going on. And so Sane, being a human and being someone that understands people pretty well, has to deal with it. And he has to help Frieren navigate these issues, right? And he manages to get Stark and Fern to realize who they are as people, who they are as partners to each other, and all of this stuff. And it's a bit romantic without meaning to, but it's really cute and meaningful. And it leads into the story of Himmel giving Frieren a romantic gesture that she just didn't understand. And then they get attacked by this bird, and they lose this romantic gesture, and they spend a long time finding it. And eventually Frieren realizes that she was missing something without knowing it, and then she finds it and she's happy about it, right? Okay, so and then they move on. They end up in this region, and the Orden family catches the team, and they force Stark to impersonate their dead son. And it turns out that Stark, this Orden family, was from the same region as Stark, and for whatever reason, Stark looks very, very similar to this young man that lost his life. And so we have like a little bit of a pauper to prince type situation here that I thought was interesting. And this actually helps Stark deal with his loss and his reality and his issues that he has, right? It almost ends up being cathartic or therapeutic to see him become this prince, this this person that is going to lead, right? And then he sees that the Orden family head has a young son, and that he expects a bit too much of him. And Stark has a conversation with him and tells him that he should tell his son that he's proud of him, that the boy needs to hear it, that he's not going to be a genius, but he's going to be a hard worker, and that he deserves a bit more praise. And so the guy does this, and they deal with all of the stuff they have to do, and then they move on to the next section, right? And they meet this old dwarf, this guy that reminds him of Aizen, who's really, really ancient, and him and Stark have a little bit of a Yoda-Luke kind of relationship there. And him and Frieren chat, and they have this moment of bittersweetness where the old dwarf is the protector of the city or of this town, but at this point, he doesn't even remember the face of his wife, who was the reason why he protected this town. This was the hometown of his wife 400 something years ago. And he doesn't even remember her voice or her face or her anything. He just remembers the emotions he felt for her, and that's why he continues to be here. And through his conversation with Frieren, he manages to jog his memory a little bit and dreams of her one more time, and he finally remembers her. And it's really beautiful. It's very bittersweet. It's something that I think all of us can kind of understand and kind of agree with if we've felt lost in our lives before, right? My grandma died when I was 12. I'm 25 now. It's been quite a long time. It doesn't really affect me all that much anymore, but sometimes it is hard to remember her, right? Like I know her face because I have pictures of her, but I don't remember her voice. I remember like a lot of stuff she did and memories I have of her, but I'm missing information. It got lost in the shuffle. And so this moment, even though it didn't necessarily affect me that much because my relationship with my grandparents is not necessarily bad or like distant or anything, but I was an immigrant kid, so I didn't see them very often, so I wasn't that close to them. So my relationship to them is not necessarily super deep, and so this didn't affect me directly, but I understood quite clearly all of the depth and difficulty that this has, right? It's very melancholic, and I really enjoyed this moment. Finally, Sane continues his journey with the team. He finds a lead for his friend who was called Guerrilla Warrior, and so there's a turning point here. The team is going up north directly to Äußerst, and Sane's lead leads them to the side. I think it was to the west, maybe it was to the east. I can't remember. And so they have to split ways, and he doesn't really know, what the right process is. But Frieren tells him that this is his dream. He wants to find his warrior guerrilla friend, and so he should do that. And so he goes on, and they have a quick, short goodbye, and so they split up there. And it's quite nice. I like this moment. I'm curious if Sane's going to come back later, if him and Guerrilla Warrior are going to become members of the party, or if this is just kind of the end, and this is kind of a way to show us that sometimes people join us on our journeys, and they don't have to stay for that long, but they might mean something to us anyways, right? I'm not really sure. And the story, or this arc, ends with Fern being sick, and Frieren taking care of her, and then finally making it to Äußerst. And I really enjoyed this arc. I thought that the plotline was pretty transitionary, right? It wasn't all that, meaningful in terms of action and stuff like that. But it was very deep in terms of character. Like, it gives us a lot of special things, and it gives us a lot of theming that is prevalent and important to Frieren, right? And I think that this is probably the best arc so far, and the best arc in the first 60 chapters, which is the first season, at dealing with those themes, right? So I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. In terms of characters, we get Stark. We get his backstory, which is, I think, pretty meaningful. We learn about Sane. We learn his backstory as well, which is not that meaningful because this character comes and goes. We meet Guerrilla Warrior and the Dwarf Man. I can't remember his name, but he was a dwarf protector guy, and I actually quite like him. I really enjoy these old little Yoda guys that kind of pop up here and there in the story. But there really isn't too much else going on here. I think mostly it was all about world building stuff, right? So in terms of world building, we get introduced to priest magic. We learn how it's different from wizard magic, right? They focus on incantations. They have a contract with the goddess, basically, and they read her scriptures, and through saying them, they can do things, right? So basically, it's kind of like they're Jesus, right? Or they're like paladins, or, I think warlocks are the ones that make pacts, right, in D&D. It's something like that, right? So they can do special things, and most of their work is about dispelling curses and healing people, right? And the goddess is explained, right? Maybe she exists, maybe she doesn't. She probably does exist in this world since it's a fantasy world, but people don't care if she does or not. People are believing in her because they need something beyond this, right? And it makes sense in this kind of medieval fantasy world where things and creatures and existence is horrible. It makes sense that you need this, right? When you are deeply afraid of life, knowing that there is a greater power there ready to take care of you is meaningful and valuable, right? But I personally don't think it's necessary in the modern world, right? So yeah, overall, pretty good stuff there. I quite liked it. In terms of artwork, beautiful, continues to be wonderful. There's no fan service here, but there is a little bit of jokes that kind of start getting to that point, right? Sane wants a older mommy type character to come and sweep him off his feet. Frieren tries to smooch him, and it's a very innocent smooch. It's quite cute, but it does kind of start getting to explore some of that raunchier stuff that you see in most shonen anime, and I don't think it'll ever get to that point, but it's funny that it does kind of skirt around trying to get to that, and I like it. I think it's good. Ratings wise, 5 out of 5. Like I said, nothing too exciting, but definitely there's a lot of depth to this story, and I really appreciated that. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Frieren arc number 3, the travel to Äußerst arc. Let me know what you thought down below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.